Few games have the good fortune of being perfect, but for me, Silent Hill 2 is. Now over 15 years old, everything in this dream-like tale of obsession, guilt, and desperate redemption feels deliberately placed. Every aspect is perfectly intended. I'm not trying to say that Silent Hill 2 is the pinnacle of video game development. Far from it. However, as games themes so comfortably align with the technology on which it was created, and because the content was so carefully curated, this is one of the rare examples of a title that few would change in a way, and it's still inspiring horror games like Resident Evil 7 to this day. Why is it perfect? Well, it's a bit of a cheat actually. Silent Hill 2 actually shares a close connection with Assassin's Creed, which is a far from a horror experience, unless you saw the Inside Out bug in Unity. Both of these games have created convenient excuses for their shortcomings, making them masterful examples of gaming design. Assassin's Creed has the unanimous a virtual reality system that the game's hero uses for the bulk of action. It's a convenient way to explain things like on-screen health bars, endless retries, and invincible walls. Classic gaming tropes we take for granted that simply wouldn't be acceptable in the real world. By telling players that their hero is playing a game within a game, Ubisoft carefully sidesteps the less realistic elements of their story and any unintentional bugs to craft a narrative that contains an extra layer of authenticity that feels closer to the player's real world. We've even seen Ubi take it a step further by positioning anonymous maker Abstergo as the real company. In a bizarre way, Silent Hill 2 does the exact same thing. The game has a dream-like quality. Nothing about it seems real to begin with. It all starts with the protagonist, James Sunderland, pounding his reflection in a filthy bathroom mirror, a smart nod to the overarching theme, and maybe a cheeky reference to the eyes being the window to the soul, immediately forcing the player to acknowledge who they are taking control of. They instantly become part of James' nightmare, and from then on, anything that happens does so within the context of this state of unreality. As you descend the overly long pathway into town, you're slipping deeper in James' nightmare. Once you accept this, any number of technical shortcomings can be written off as a part of a bizarre dream that the game exists within. A bit flimsy? Well, it goes a little deeper, thanks to the handful of happy coincidences and smart slices of design. First off, the fog. Silent Hill 2 was created on a console called the PlayStation 2 with a relatively limited draw distance. So, instead of rendering the whole town as far as the eye can see, technical limits forced the developers to blanket it with a murky shroud of mist. I say forced, chances are the team was happy to do it, because there's something deeper, unsettling about hearing creatures shuffling around in the haze. The bulk of horror then takes place in the player's imagination as they wonder the abomination will come shuffling out. Guess what? The fog is now an integral part of the game. When it was thin for the HD remakes on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, it actually lessened the experience. Same applies to the now outdated controls. To fight, you need to pull a trigger, aim and press a button on the pad. The effect is always underwhelming, as if the game is deliberately making you feel helpless. Which you are. James is just a normal, guy, not a soldier or a ninja. He's pathetic in a fight. And when you try to run, the original tank controls and fixed camera angles make it awkward, annoying. As the player, you're meant to feel weak, at the mercy of monsters which may or may not be in your mind. To an extent, Resident Evil 7 plays with similar feelings of helplessness. You're locked to a first person, forcing you to live with the terror and never detach from it. Play in VR. and that gets taken to a whole new level. It's another example of players thinking about the benefits and limits of current technology and bending it to make the player feel vulnerable in a face of the otherworldly terror. Kojima deliberately used the downloadable demo to ratchet tension and slowly unfold a story over the course of the 7 hours. It's smart to use the existing tech and expectations. Now, you're probably thinking that I'm making excuses for Silent Hill 2. Perhaps, but the quantity of the deliberate knobs from the developer blurs the line between intentional and accidental. Maybe the controls are just crappy. Maybe all the doors are just locked because they couldn't be bothered to render more rooms, and not, as I suggest, to reinforce the panicked feeling of disorientation and inability to escape. Maybe. So why then does the game delight in messing with you in other ways? Like the way it changes the ending dependent on seemingly innocuous details with the game. For example, if you spend most of your time with health below 50, you'll get water, ending where James commits suicide by driving his car into Toluca Lake. It's the creators assuming that you don't care for your own life if you can't be bothered to heal. And what about the dead guy in the Woodside apartment, who looks at an awful lot like James? There are too many examples of smart game designs to dismiss shortcomings as deliberately clumsy. And then there's Maria. She's the pivot on which the game unbalances the physical man-infestation of James' desires. The woman he always wished Mary, his dead wife, was. Her constant disappearing and reappearing act keeps the player disoriented, while the threat of the unkillable primate head keeps them on the... You'll never feel uncomfortable playing this game. It's a potent combination, but one that remains undulled by time. Because now, back in 2001, you're just as helpless and bewildered. In fact, because modern games have increasingly veered towards hand-holding and pandering to power fantasies, it's even more refreshing to find one that deliberately wants to punish its players. We've grown accustomed to being threatened like the hero, not the villain, and this only magnifies Silent Hill 2's vile device and themes. Again, Resident Evil 7, by rebooting the increasingly gung-ho franchise, takes us away from the power fantasy we see in other games. While we're by no means helpless in Resident Evil 7, there's never a sense that you're overpowered and uncomfortable, and this is at the root of a great horror game. Same with Outlast. These games follow Silent Hill 2's example of making players feel uncomfortable with themselves and often helpless while they progress. It's a smart trick. Resident Evil 7 plays with notion about who the bad guy really is, using it to throw you off balance. In a mirror image of Silent Hill 2's, you start out thinking you're the good guy, but actually, the villain of Resident Evil 7 immediately presents you with the stereotypical battles you expect, before turning the notion on its head halfway through. No spoilers here, but you know who I'm talking about. A perfect game then. Not one that creates an unimpeachable utopia that's 100% guaranteed to delight anyone who plays it. Can that truly exist? But a grim, unrelenting, uncomfortable descent through one's nightmare, where everything bad or frustrating happens as part of the overall experience. Embracing imperfection, steering into the skid, is perhaps the only way a game can be perfect, and that's Silent Hill 2's true dark brilliance, even now in 2017. Silent Hill 2 gets a, you know what, fuck it, this gets a 10 out of 10 for me. This is definitely one of my favorite games of all time, and a game that I'm going to be replaying this October towards Halloween time. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.